My name's Eric Crump. I'm the editor of the Homewood Flossmoor Chronicle, and we're here today to speak with three elected officials from the Southland to talk about racial and police violence, and especially the work they've been doing since June 2020, when the murder of George Floyd provoked a racial reckoning all over the world. Don, are there things that you were especially frustrated by, but were able to take a good lesson from? Anything you tried?
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that came out of all of this too was, the money that we got from the federal government at the county level. The county was able to put $85 million towards community-based organizations that are going to be focused on whatever they can do within their respective communities related to justice, related to improving outcomes of policing, related to all the different tactics that they've used to kind of cut down on the amount of violence in different communities. So I think that when we see something, on that high level, how it gets funneled down to the micro level where we can actually go to an organization to say, what can you do in this community? And it just started, so we don't know what's going to happen with that yet. But I think the focus of being able to say, we need that came from all of the outcry from communities saying, we need something, we need help, and we're the ones who can do it. But they can't do it without funding. And they can't do it without the help and collaboration of the police department. So working together on every level, as we see from, county, state, federal, that's what's going to get the work done. So I think the outcry that we saw from young people marching in Homewood, with the first march ever, I think, that had ever occurred in Oak Forest, where they had a march after George Floyd. So to see that people are listening, people care, people wanted to do something, and they might not have seemed like they had their voices heard before, but now they do. And now that we can put some money towards, making these programs work, hopefully we'll see some changes come. So that's one of the yet to be kind of things.
It sounds like a good message for the young protesters who got out into the streets, but then by July and August, they didn't really see what was happening. But what you're suggesting is that they started a ball rolling that is still rolling, and the results may still come in more visible form.
Absolutely. And some of these community-based organizations might not have even existed in 2020, but they exist now.
Okay.
And then they come and they're able to do work.
Do you have cases like that? Yeah.
I wanted to speak to the frustration that we encountered with misinformation. When you try to create reform, the people who are going to be resistant to that are going to create their own narrative. And the narrative had many loopholes in it where there was just complete untruths that were being spread, and which then made people apprehensive and maybe made them less enthusiastic about pursuing criminal justice reform, pursuing some of the elements that were being put in place to address racism, to address violence, police violence. And so that was the most frustrating to me, is because then I had to go out and do town hall meetings and meet with homeowners groups and meet with civic organizations to get the real message out, the real truth of the matter of what was being done on the state level.
Do you feel like those outreach efforts generally were successful, or do you get a lot of people who have kind of shut the door?
Absolutely, I found them successful, because once people heard what really was in the law, what really was being created, then they were in agreement with it because it made perfect sense. However, you still had those underlying mistruths that were being spread.
I'm glad you mentioned narrative, because it occurs to me, and I've read this before too, that our country has a narrative, a story that it tells itself about who we are as a people, and that story has problems that you're all trying to correct, but I'm wondering, how do you correct the story?
When I ran for state rep many moons ago, 20 years ago now, one thing I would always say, I worked for the Village of Matheson for 13 years, and that I feel like in the south suburbs that they put one broad brush on us, who they think lives here, how smart we are, what we can afford, things we're interested in. And we, to me, have to fight against that. And sometimes that gets ingrained in people, almost like internalized oppression for some people, but also it leads you to think, oh, they're all like this, which is not true. We're a very diverse area in the Southland. We have all kinds of people that live here. Some of us are highly educated. Some of us have, high school diplomas, but you still could be a very smart person, And we make our money in a variety of ways. And that's something I feel that's a misinformation I feel like we always have to, fight against. I know Commissioner Miller is a big champion of that, about what about the South Suburbs? What about the South Suburbs? And we have to keep saying that. Like, I have to remind people and also be careful because I'm urban, suburban, and rural. So I have Chicago now, but oftentimes people will say we have to do this in Chicago and they need it in the rural areas. And they think everybody, people in the suburbs don't need it. You know what I mean? So we have to continually fight for this region.
Right.
Yes.
Sticking up for us. All right.
Well, and as it relates to crime too, I know they're both very intimately aware of this, but when, even when the huge surge of carjackings was happening and people were saying, oh, well, the carjackings are so bad in the city of Chicago, where they were equally as bad in suburban Cook County, but wasn't getting the same. Crime is the same. And so it's everywhere. But what are we going to do about it as far as, I really feel like, because I've talked to so many of our police chiefs, that they really have a handle on knowing what's happening in their communities because it's smaller and because they are more intimately involved in the community. So they know what's happening and they had ideas on things that could be implemented that could have, more funding helps them get those things done. But also the awareness of it gets out into the community quicker than it might be in Chicago because it's so big. So in Homewood, what's happening in Homewood, what's happening in Linwood because it's communicated on a smaller scale and people are really aware of what's going on in their community. And I think that's what's going to help curb more violence as well and create awareness for people as to what they can do for it.
The other thing that I think has occurred is that there's more conversation about mental health. And we realize that mental health in many situations is at the core of crime, at the core of disruption in communities. And I've heard it said that Cook County Jail is the largest mental health facility in the state because police are put in those situations where they're dealing with mental health issues. And so part of what the criminal justice reform pillar said was that we needed policemen to be trained in mental health. And then there also needs to be programs where if there is a call, a determination is made that it's not a crime call, but it is a mental health call. And therefore, there should be counselors that are able to go out with police to address the situation appropriately. And I know that McHenry County does that very well. My seatmate, Representative Ness, they're very proud of the fact that they have had so much success with mental health counselors going out in partnership with the police.
That's it. And Don, I think the county has a similar program to the co-responder, right?
Right. So that just was implemented several months ago. So we have, I don't know if it actually happened yet or it's about to happen, but we passed it for it to happen for 2 mental health providers to be on staff through the sheriff, through the police, so that they do get those calls.
Yes.
And they can triage those calls. And the other thing that's very, Cook County is known, especially the sheriff, unfortunately having the most mental health, situations in the county jail. But we also have services at the county jail to deal with the people. And they said it's a high staggering number. It might have been like 9 out of 10 people who come to the county jail have some sort of mental health need.
Yeah.
So if they're unfortunately able to come to the jail and get those services, that helps them in the long run to deal with the real issue that might have brought them there in the first place. Mm-hmm. And we have seen tons of data through the county as to what we're doing inside the jail to help with mental health.
We just had the Congressional Black Caucus was just in Chicago. I wanted to hear from young people because they always say to us, you're making decisions about us, but not including us. So there were 12, I think, young people that came, and they had the opportunity to speak to 8 to 10 CBC members, and they were 18 to 26 or something like that, and from different walks of life. And they raised the issue of violence. They raised the issue of mental health that came up over and over. They talked about voting also. Commissioner Miller's 2 sons participated in that. And, I think it's very important that we address this issue. And one of my colleagues has had a bill for a long time that every school needs to have a social worker, a therapist, or a counselor. And COVID just exacerbated, the space that we're in now. And, we say the social determinants of health, but I always say the social determinants of life, because those very same things, your housing, your education, poverty, and your health affect your life, or what your life is going to be like without intervention.
And they also talked about the trauma.
The trauma, right. And then another time when it wasn't just CBC members, but I had young people under 30, and I found this very interesting how many of them did not want police officers in their schools. Now, most of them were from Chicago. I had a Parkland student there, and she wanted a police officer in her school, but I remember my kids are older now, but when they were young, I loved the police officer, but it has to be the right person in the school. It can't be punishment for the police officer. They have to want to work with young people.
The fact you mentioned the young people who you spoke with reminded me of another thing I was curious about, which is we're asking our elected officials to do things for us. That's what you're supposed to do. But you also have constituents who are some very interested in being part of the solution. What kinds of things do you suggest that the people you serve do to either help you accomplish things in government or just to help address the problems of racial inequity, of racial violence and police violence? Do you have ideas we could share with them?
I think that they just have to be more engaged, and you have to invite them to be engaged, because many constituents, many residents don't know that they have the power to be involved. They have the power to make a difference, but they have to be engaged. They have to speak up, and they have to voice their concerns, and they have to be agreeable to working together with neighbors, working with law enforcement. And I will say that I was so proud of the local police departments in the south suburbs in particular, because those police officers, I believe, do community policing. They know the kids, they know the parents, they know that if they are a child is out past curfew or driving with, making infractions and driving, that they can call the parents and it doesn't become, a tense situation. And so I was so proud that relationship exists in many of our municipalities.
Yeah, I echo that too. Yeah. I just think involvement matters. Showing up to your local municipal meetings, being involved if there's a crime or violence prevention task force, which many communities do have. I always invite everybody to come to the county, come to a county meeting. You can come to any of our committee meetings and make your voice heard. We just had a big hearing on maternal health, morbidity. We just need people to be more engaged on the issues they care about. And I think that's one thing the young people are seeing in a different way. I mean, we always say most movements start with young people, have started in over history, have started with young people, but they are the ones to be socially aware and to communicate that with each other so that they show up and show out, and they know how to get the word out to each other quickly. And that's how all those marches got started and, had, their audience full. So I would just say people need to get involved, but I just want to say too about being the community. So the other day, my son got pulled over for driving. He said he was in a tense situation where a car looked like it was coming, so he made a right turn on red when they weren't supposed to because he felt like he was going to get hit if he didn't. Luckily, after he told me the story, of course, I was sick all day, though, because I'm thinking that could have gone a different way, but it didn't. And he was in Lansing, and, I know that police department's pretty accommodating. Not that they know him, but they just gave him a warning because he explained the situation. But as a mother, when we hear these kind of situations happen, all I could think about all day was, what if that didn't happen? Even though I'm glad it did, but what if it didn't? Even in our own backyard. So I just think being aware of situations and preparing the children, the young people, I don't want to be children. So preparing them for what happens when, we all say, all of us have had the talk with our children or people that we know in our community, what to do, and the what to do came into play in real life for us the other day.
And I'm so going to go back to voting, because who's at the table will make a difference in what bills get passed. And also not just you voting, make sure your 18-year-old and older are registered, your 50-year-old friend is registered and voting. Call your friends that live in red states and make sure they're voting and that their representative hears from them. And then the other thing is people. Every level of government is important. Who serves on your school board is important. Look at, what happens in the schools. Who serves on your county board is important. Who serves on your, who serves as your state rep, a state senator is important. Who serves on your municipal level. Really, that's where the rubber meets the road. As someone that has worked on every level of government, that we cannot forget any level, and we have to show up for all the levels. It is just so important.
So that's a great suggestion. That's one of my missions in life, is to make school board meetings cool. So everybody wants to go.
Yes.
and village board meetings. And,
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Because you have to get into the schools. That's where the young people are. And that's where sometimes some of the troubles brew. Fights among students, and it gets bigger because of social media. So you really have to be super aware and focused on our schools, not just high school, but elementary school as well.
at every level. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. Do we have any? I wonder if we have any last comments, or maybe what's next. There's always things you're working on, I know. Are there any projects that are particularly important to the issue of racism and police violence that we should be looking for?
Well, I'm proud to say that there was money in the governor's budget this year for violence prevention, and I was able to tap into some of that to work with local violence prevention organizations, and I'm very excited about the potential for that work because they have been successful in other regions, and I'm looking forward to being able to partner with them to address some of the issues in the south suburbs. Again, working with schools, working with police chiefs. I have a police chief meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks with chiefs who really may have concerns about what's going to happen over the summer. We've heard that, there have been incidents already where, hundreds of teenagers showed up and they were concerned and they didn't know how to address it. So I'm very excited about working with these local violence prevention agencies in our region.
And we need to keep in touch so we can report on the progress you make.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things I've been working on through NACO, which is National Association of County Officials. So I'm on the Safety and Justice Challenge cohort. So it's a national group. And I just thought it was important for someone not from the city of Chicago to be involved. Not to say that, we're excluding Chicago, but we are the model for Cook County for a lot of restorative justice programs and community policing ideas, and how we get that implemented and what ideas can we take from other communities across the whole country. So it's a 2-year cohort. We're in year 1. So at the end of that, there'll be a whole report, a whole analysis, and a whole guideline of these are some takeaways that we can do. I always say Cook County is the second largest county in the whole country. So whatever happens here makes influence to other counties. But there's other counties, not only obviously throughout the whole country, but right here in the state of Illinois, that we can make changes on based on what we're doing at Cook County.
I'll be working on, beside the legislation dealing with the attorney generals, I have legislation for training and mental health for the first responders, because the 911 operators, they don't have the same support as police and fire. And because of someone I know very well that did the job for a while, and she shared things that they went through, but they're very important in being able to communicate what the police officer is going to. There's been some shootings that either the police officer didn't understand what the first responder was saying, or it was misinformation. So making sure, that people are trained, but also they have the support they need, because they've heard people getting beat up over the phone, people, committing suicide and all of that. So they need support also. I'd like State Rep Myers-Martin. I'll have a meeting with my police and fire first responders, I think this week, to see what they need going forward. But we've tried to get a lot of resources to them to help them do their job in a better way of what they feel will help them.
Great. They're not on the streets, so we don't see them and we don't think about them, but we need to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
okay. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we've learned some good things about what you're working on and the challenges you face. And that's always good to let your constituents know. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.